Okay, thanks a million, Fred. I suppose it's interesting because PJ was at the other end of the scale. I'm going back actually, and the centre I work with is actually concerned with prenatal care. Okay, so we've gone from the elderly to literally the unborn. So just in terms of, I'll say a few words about myself afterwards, but what I want to talk about really today is about this idea of impact, innovation for impact. Okay, so I think we're increasingly in an environment where we're all talking about innovation, but at the same time we're competing for resources, we're competing for attention, we're competing for funding. I think we had someone from Enterprise Ireland in here this morning, we probably had people from SFI, we got internal funding, and essentially we have to justify our existence. And that doesn't come at the end of a project, it now needs to come at the start of a project where we're essentially saying this is the impact we will create as a result of undertaking this project. So it's very interesting, it ties in a bit with the stuff PJ is talking about. It's very much bringing a sort of design slant at the way we think. Not necessarily design thinking itself, but some of those same methods. Okay, so that's what I will be talking about, and hopefully, just in terms of myself, I'll just pick maybe one or two things because I'm conscious of the time. At the moment, I'm a research fellow with that Infant Centre, which is a collaboration funded by SFI between UCC and the maternity hospital in CUH, in Cork University Hospital. One of the projects, and the one that I'm primarily involved in, is a project called LANIV, which is focused really on improving the outcomes for expectant mothers. So instead of mothers ending up in hospital very often for no reason other than maybe white coat syndrome, blood pressures going through the roof, is what we're doing is moving some of those solutions to the home. So it's very much tying with the Internet of Things approach. Also, I suppose I wear a number of different hats. I also lecture on innovation in UCC. I do on the Global Lecturing Planning panel for the Irish Management Institute, as well as other bits and pieces. My own background, most of it has been in industry. Most recently setting up an innovation centre for a UK software company and involved in various, I suppose, product development projects before that. Okay, everyone can hear me? Yeah. I'm not going too fast. I know there's a comment about being from Cork, so if the accent is a bit difficult to understand or it's too fast, tell me just to slow it down. Okay, so what are we going to do? So I think very often when we're looking at innovation, and I've done maybe a PhD in the area of innovation, we're very much focused on how we do it. We're focused on the system, the processes, the activities, the metrics. They're always the questions we're nearly asked when we start talking as a group about innovation. Whereas really what I want to focus on today is not the how, but the why. Why are we saying we're engaging in a particular initiative? And what I want to do is take you through 4 very quick steps, which is first of all trying to focus on that question of why. Next is then what value does that why give and to whom? And then thirdly, is there a wow, is there a magic element in it? And finally, and only finally, the how. So in a way, the how comes last, not up front. Okay, so a lot of us would have seen maybe in terms of innovation or research this type of process where we execute and manage from the left to the right in terms of research or innovation activities. We come up with outputs or outcomes, and ultimately we hope for impacts. Okay, whereas what we're talking about now is you design up front for impact and you work the other way. Okay, so you design the impacts, you then determine what outcomes you need to deliver those impacts, and in turn what activities you need to execute. So it's what we call backward thinking. Most of us are programmed to think forwards. Okay, what do I need to do today, then tomorrow, then the day after? Whereas this is really about having a vision for something in the future and working back from then. So it's a very simple technique. Unfortunately, I suppose I and others have learned this the hard way by sometimes getting it right, sometimes not getting it right. But ultimately, I think there's things we can do to improve our chance of success, and I think this is one of them. So it's based on, I suppose, work we'd have done in industry primarily, that we would have then brought back into a sort of a public research framework, and then ultimately back into even academic research. But it would have been very much born from insights from industry and brought back in. Okay, so I don't know if we've ever experienced this thing where we understand a concept in such detail that when we start explaining it, we start digging more and more into detail. And next thing we look up, we look around the room, and we just know everyone is lost. Okay, it's a terrible feeling. A lot of us put it down to maybe the craft of communication. But it isn't just about communication. Communication helps, but it's also about having a vision or not having a vision. And essentially the guy on the right is able to create that vision and the message around the vision. And very often that's the difference between getting muddled in detail versus being able to craft that message, which is really very often about having a vision. And that's essentially what we're talking about today. So step one, this is going to be very quick. Okay, so generally these slides are from a workshop we gave fairly recently to a research team. Okay, so we call them research games. But essentially we start with the why. And we try and get people to visualize themselves, their projects, at a point in the future, looking backwards about the success, and hopefully it is a success, of that project. So what we're essentially doing is asking to visualize what that is like, and ultimately maybe communicate in terms of a cover story or a press release. Now these are fictitious, they're not things that you're going to release, but they're things that are force you to crystallize that vision into something tangible. So it's a future, as you can see on the top left there, maybe cover story in a magazine that's talking about the success of your initiative, or it could be a press release in the future talking about the success of your initiative. Okay, I remember showing this to people, and some people are amazed, even though it's very simple, but I remember also showing to people that are very much into professional sports, and they say, well, isn't this what we all do? We visualize, I don't know if you see now in particular in rugby, where someone, before they take a kick, a penalty, they're visualizing what it is going to be like when they actually execute. This is a very, very similar approach. Okay, so very typically what we do, as I say, is step one would be the likes of writing a press release. This technique is also used by companies. Amazon is a classic example, where you're expected to write the press release before you get the funding or the resources. And what they do is they measure how well it resonates with the community. If it doesn't resonate with your own fellow employees, it doesn't get funded. If it doesn't resonate potentially with a market, it doesn't get funded. Okay, so generally there's a number of steps, very simple. I'm not sure how many people have written press releases, but probably the key one is the 5 W's. Who is the problem? What is the problem you're solving? Where is it a problem? When is it a problem? And why? Now, really the magic sauce when you're doing this is the bit that probably isn't written up there, is trying to size the problem. How big a problem is it? Okay, so there's loads of problems everywhere, but there's only certain problems that really are, I suppose, are attractive or viable for an organization. So it's trying to give a sense of a size to the problem, or even a size to the solution. If you solve it, what's in it at the end of the day? So as I said, you're writing this from the point in the future. It could be 2-3 years, or I think people earlier were talking about maybe the bio industry, which sometimes has a far longer lead time. So you're talking about a point in the future looking backwards. Okay? So that's step one. Step two, and I can notice whatever is happening with this screen, the formatting is all over the place, so apologies for that, is we now look at that vision in step one, and we convert it into what value does it deliver? So essentially what we're doing is we take all the potential beneficiaries you can see for that initiative, okay, and that can be anything from you yourself, because very often the most important person sometimes is you, right, customers, or possibly right up as far as society. For each of these, we then break it down into what does this research, this innovation deliver that these beneficiaries, these stakeholders can't do or can't do well at the moment. So it's calling out those differences. Ultimately, what are they looking for in terms of being able to do those things? Now, I have an example hopefully here. I have no idea what it's going to look like because I can see the formatting going a bit wrong here. So we did a workshop maybe about 2 weeks ago for the food industry, and the challenge was, well, I'm not, I suppose I don't have domain knowledge in the food industry, so it was, can we come up with what it would look like for an example in that industry? So, very quick example, this is microbiota research. It's a research center. So what we did was we broke across, first of all, the potential beneficiaries. Who would gain value from the activities of this research center? So it was consumers, the food safety authorities, industry, economy. So you can see it's going towards a macro level, society itself. What we then did was broke down in terms of what are the individual things that this research can do for each of these stakeholders that they can't do or can't do well at the moment. So in this case, I'm not sure how easy it is to read at the back, but for consumers it might be in terms of managing family health. It might be consuming healthier products. Food safety authorities, it might be control diet-related diseases, monitor food safety, advise on healthy eating. So these are all things this research centre, in this case, could deliver value in terms of each stakeholder. So here, in terms of industry, new improved products, new processes. Economy would be future economic value, so that might be jobs, etc. Sharing knowledge. Society, to promote healthier populations, healthier workforces, animal welfare, and we keep on going across. For each of these jobs then, what does that mean in terms of desired outcome? So it might be increased family well-being, reduced diet-related diseases, reduced food safety cases, increased shelf life. Hopefully you get the idea at this stage. So what we've done is gone from the stakeholders down to the individual I suppose value adds that we can deliver for each of these stakeholders, and then the outcomes that that stakeholder group is looking for in terms of what we call the jobs. Now the holy grail really is to try and get from there down to what we call metrics. So in this case, for example, we're talking about 10,000 reduction in food safety cases, or adding so many months shelf life to products, contributing 24 million per annum. Each euro in research delivery, 8 euros in. Okay, so we've gone from essentially a vision, which was step one, to what value we can add, breaking that down into each stakeholder, and essentially down into the metrics. Okay, still with me? Okay, so that's essentially step two. Okay, step three, we've now gone through why, what, and essentially it's about the magic sauce. Is there something different about what we're doing here than is being done already? Now there's a whole set of templates here again. I'll just focus on one, which is essentially the innovation value proposition. So my innovation delivers something to stakeholders in order to that is different in that. So we fill in essentially the template. It's actually drawing out of you what is different about the research, the innovation we're undertaking here that isn't available elsewhere. It is essentially your elevator pitch. Okay, step three. On to step four, and it's only now we start to focus on the how. Okay, we have a sense of where we want to go. We have a sense of the value we can add. We have a sense of what's different about it, and now we start focusing on how do we deliver it. Again, very often we think in terms of forward, but here what we actually do is fill this in backwards. We start essentially with the benefits or the impacts, come back into the outcomes. Outcomes are shorter term impacts. Based on outcomes, come back into what outputs I need to deliver. Then in terms of the activities I need to create those outputs and the inputs. Okay, so essentially at this stage we should have closed the circle. 1 minute. Okay, time flies when you're enjoying yourself. Okay, so, and that's essentially the fourth step. Now, I love this. People always say, well, you do it and it's on a wall. Generally what we'd say is you always go back to it. It's a living piece of work, okay? Things don't always work out the way we intended, so you go back, revisit it, and I think this idea is very often the planning or the doing is better than actually what you produced. Okay, and that's my take on it.